Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Poema podcast. I am James Prescott, your host. Welcome to the show. It's really great to be with you all again today. And I'm really excited today. I've got a friend of mine who has been on the podcast before, coming back for their second time on the show. Looking forward to it. Welcome back to the show, Ali Smith.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's great to have you back on. I can't wait. We were just talking before we started recording about when the last time you came on was, and I can't remember. It was a couple of years ago, I think. But yeah. So anyway, it's good to have you back on the show. Long before time, we've got lots to talk about. So just for like people who didn't listen last time, maybe, or who you're new to, just tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Ali Smith. I use they, them, and they, fair pronouns. I am a queer disabled business owner living in Southeast Kansas. I'm an Enneagram 1, Wing 2. I founded a local nonprofit here in Southeast Kansas called Q Space. It's a local community of support for LGBTQ plus people. And my business is called The Witchy Bibliophile, where I upcycle, forage, and grow witchy items for your magical needs. Yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, and we've been friends for a while, and yeah, and you make really good Taylor Swift memes for Twitter as well. I should say, like
Yeah,
really good ones, like because you're a Swiftie, aren't you? Like me, I'm kind of a Swiftie.
for sure. I'm excited. I get to see her in July. So,
You're going! Oh,
yeah.
that's very exciting. That's fantastic. Yeah, I forgot she's doing a tour. Like, yeah, I did a whole episode on Taylor Swift and the Enneagram with Jenna DeWitt a few weeks ago. It was fantastic. We talked about the tour as well, like, and Ticketmaster and everything. So that was
Oh,
fun.
good. That was a nightmare. I was sitting at my computer all day to get those tickets.
I bet. Like, yeah, I didn't even try because I knew I wouldn't get any. Like, and also they're really expensive. I don't even know if Taylor's coming to the UK actually. So I hope they are, but who knows?
I hope she is starting a national tour after the US tour.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. But me going on my own to see Taylor Swift will be a bit weird. Um, but you know, anyway. Taylor Swift, we're both Swifties, yes. And another thing that we both are is autistic and ADHD. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is your journey into that and learning that about yourself and getting a diagnosis. So it's something we talk about a lot on the show. Those things, partly because it's part of my story, and partly because those things are important to talk about. And so yeah. So tell us a bit about your kind of story with autism and ADHD and how kind of you began to realize that you were, and then getting the diagnosis.
Sure. Yeah. Like a lot of people, I think I realized a lot about myself during the pandemic the last few years.
Hmm.
Had some time for some introspection away from other people and really getting to know, myself. And then also TikTok, if I'm being honest. A lot of relatable content I saw on TikTok was from neurodivergent people, right? So people who labeled themselves as neurodivergent. A lot of them said they were autistic or had ADHD or both. And I was relating to a lot of this content, but I'm like, I've never even thought about this my entire life. Like I've never thought about this. I'm like, um, and I think part of that is I was in a bubble being in evangelical Christianity. I was homeschooled, kind of in a bubble as far as what those things were. And then whenever I learned what autism and ADHD were, I think a lot of it was very stereotypical. And then also a lot of the research and the diagnostic criteria for ADHD and autism, were based on cis white males, right? And I am one of those things. I'm white, but I was born female, so I it was assigned female at birth, and um, and that's very was very rare up until recently for people to diagnose, people who are assigned female at birth as autistic or ADHD, and so that's not really something I think people are looking for um, in me, as a child growing up, thinking about those things, and I actually was talking with Amber about it, our friend, and um, I talked with her on and off about it, and I could tell that she had opinions about what flavor of neurodivergent I was, but she wasn't telling me. And so, like one night, I like pretty much interrogated her and was like, "Amber, you have to tell me what you think. Like, what do you think? Um, like my flavor. That's how I kind of talk about it, what my flavor of neurodivergence is like." Because at the time, my spouse has ADHD, and he was diagnosed with ADHD when he was a teenager. Fairly young, but like a little older than a lot of kids were. But uh, I saw these things with him, right? And to me, I was like, well, I'm not like that. Like, I'm not like, I guess I thought that um, since I wasn't exactly like him, that I must not have ADHD. And I didn't really know about like the inattentive type of ADHD. And like the name ADHD is kind of um, strange, I guess. I know several people are talking about how it should be named something else rather than like attention
Mm,
deficit hyperactivity disorder. Like,
mm,
so there's a lot of conversation about that, which could be a whole podcast probably.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, so I saw in him that, and I'm like, well, no, that's not exactly like, I don't think I'm like that. I don't think I have these symptoms. I don't, and he would explain some different things to me that I didn't relate to. But it's a spectrum, right? All of these things, and not everyone is the exact same, even if we both have ADHD or even if we both have autism. But anyway, back to my interrogation of Amber. I, was asking them, and we were talking about it, and she's like, finally, they said, like, I think you're autistic. And I was like, okay, okay. And I'm like, all right, lay it out for me. Like, why do you think this? And like, I was connecting the dots, and then I was sharing, and Amber had also shared with me that they believed that they were autistic as well. They had shared that with me previously. So we were talking about our different experiences and stuff. And then they had me take the RADs, like right on my phone right then. And one of the first, now I forget what the RADs is actually like stands for, but it's one of the um, primary like testing or questionnaire diagnostic criteria or diagnostic tests that some people use to diagnose autism. Not just the only one, but one of them.
Mm,
And it's said that anyone who gets that only no one that's autistic gets under a 65 as a score on this test. And I started taking it, and of course, like one of the first questions it asks is, would you rather spend time with people or spend time by yourself? And that's so vague, right? Like, as an autistic person, I'm reading that, I'm like, wait, in what situation? I'm like, and who are these people?
yes.
And those were the
Yes.
questions I was asking Amber as I'm thinking this, and she's just laughing because she's like, obviously she's thinking like that's the most autistic thing you could respond with, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, 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 absolutely. Like, yeah, like what context are you talking about? How many people are you talking about? Like, what's the, yeah, all of that. Yeah.
Are these strangers? Are these my best friends? And she was like, just imagine that if that these people any people that they talk about in this test are probably not your close circle of friends. And I was like, okay then. And so I answered like that. But so many of the questions, that's my response. I'm like, wait, in what situation? Like, because it
Hmm.
depends. Um, you know, and so I took the rads. I got at the time like I have 145 or something like that. And every time I've taken the rads since then, I think my score has gone up higher. And I think it's because I've started the process of unmasking, right? And accepting a lot of my autistic traits. So they're popping out a little bit more. And so each time I take it, my score is a little bit higher. I haven't taken it in a minute, but I think the last time I took it was like a 165. So it keeps going up.
I've never done that test. I need to do that test probably.
Oh yeah, you should.
Um, I've
And
never heard of it.
after I took that, I was thinking, I'm like, I really don't believe that anyone could get under a 65. I was like having a really hard time believing that, right? Because I'm like, I got like 150, right? Like I don't know how anyone could get that low of a score on there. And so me and some other people, well, in my friend group, well, that's when I realized that most people in my friend group are either autistic or have ADHD or both, right? I'm like,
Uh,
oh, that's why we mesh, right? And we were thinking about, okay, who do we know that we think doesn't have, like, isn't autistic? So we thought of one friend, poor Sheena, because I like, I was like, we were like at a bar at the time, like, and I was like, Sheena, you have to take this test. And if you've ever taken this test, it's so long. It's like 85 questions. Like,
oh my word!
it's
Right.
really long. And I'm like, take it now. And my friends were like, Allie, no, like, she doesn't need to take it now. Like, but she knows, like, of course I will do this for you. She's an Enneagram 6. And she took the test on her phone really diligently. And then she's like, okay, I'm done. And I'm like, what's your score? Her score was like a 20 something. I think it was like 22 or something like that. And I was just like in shock because I'm like, okay, I was wrong. Like there are people that can get under 65, like autistic people exist. And and she didn't even know what the test was for. And she is just like, this means I'm stupid, isn't it? Doesn't it? And I was like, no, Sheena, it's not like she thought it was like an IQ test or something. And I'm like, no, no, no. This just means that you aren't autistic. And she's like, oh, okay. um, but that I think helped me kind of put things into perspective because if you are someone who is undiagnosed autistic who spends most of their time around other autistic people, you're not going to really see a difference, right, between how you communicate or act versus other people. You know, you can have conversations where you're like, oh my gosh, like I could never wear this shirt because it's so itchy and weird. Like, oh, don't get that shirt. That one has that material. And then, you know, or like, oh my gosh, like we just bought this food and it's different. Like we have to throw it out. What new food are we like? I've had those conversations with people and they're just normal,
Yeah,
right?
the food thing's big for me because I can always tell the difference between own brand stuff and the actual stuff, like the stuff that's like the big brands. Like even if just it's just crisps or something. And I didn't know you wouldn't like. I could always tell a difference. I could always do the Pepsi challenge as well, like easily.
Uh-huh.
Like I could eat, I still can, like, and I don't even drink it that much now. But like I could, yeah, I was always like I could tell the difference between what brand of things they were. Like if we bought oven chips, I could tell if they were like the own brand or the nice brand. I could always tell that difference. I didn't realize that was an autistic thing until recently. Like, but it makes so much sense.
Yeah, it does. Um, and there are many things that I didn't really realize were an autistic thing until recently, and I'm like, oh, like that's just how I function, you know. So I don't see any difference, um, But whenever I started to put these, things into place, a lot of the past started to make a lot more sense. Different, arguments or falling outs I've had with different people over the years, like those started to make more sense. Um,
Yeah.
Trauma that I had and bullying that I had, growing up, or even in the workplace, those things started to make more sense to me. Like, oh, and you know, I realized that a lot of people that have been mean to me in my life, they knew I was autistic before I did. And maybe they didn't know I was autistic. Maybe that didn't wasn't a conscious thing. But there's
Mm.
been research about people and their first impressions of autistic people versus holistic people, and a lot of times they don't like us. And
Mm.
they know something's different. They know something's different and they treat us differently because of it. Um,
Wow. That makes so much sense. Like, because I was always like, I was never a people person. I always like struggled to get on with people to start with, and yeah, and like not knowing, I mean, not knowing what to say and how to talk, and like not being naturally easygoing, and like people didn't just get on with me naturally. I didn't have like big groups of friends. I had like one or two friends. And God, that makes so much sense now. See, I didn't know that
yeah,
about but autism, like that, but that makes a lot of sense because, yeah, sometimes people don't like me, which I find really weird because I'm a nice person generally. Like when you talk to me, like, so,
you
but
are.
yeah, but it was just they sensed something different that maybe I didn't know until about the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, and I've realized that a lot of neurotypical people kind of make a lot of assumptions how about me based on like how I'm communicating or not communicating in the way that they want me to. Um, or if I'm not, prescribing to their rules, socially, um, of how you're supposed to interact with other people. Because apparently neurotypicals have a handbook somewhere. I know it's somewhere. They just hid it from us.
Yes,
All the rules of society, right?
that's right. I was always wondering, like, how does everyone just know this stuff? Like, where's the secret book that everyone just read and I didn't read? Like, that everyone just knows all these things and I don't know any of them. I'm just having to literally learn them and pick them up and teach myself them while I'm in the middle of a social group and like masking and all that kind of thing and acting like just almost. I realized this recently. I had literally learned to act like everyone else was acting as a like masking because I thought, oh, this is how everyone else is acting, and if I behave like this, and then I'll just then I'll look normal, because I thought normal. Yeah, I mean, I thought because back then it's like normal is like me bad, I think everyone else normal kind of thing. Because I didn't know I was autistic to start with, but yeah, that's so yeah, that's definitely resonating with me. Yeah.
So at what age did you kind of realize you're autistic?
Well, it was my sister who first kind of semi-diagnosed me because my sister worked in mental health and with people with autism and people with other, with different conditions and stuff, and had experience of it. And uh, it was her that kind of pointed it out that I might have autism or be on the spectrum. People were still using the term Asperger's at that point, but obviously they're not using that anymore for completely correct reasons. But like, and then I started to pay attention and did a bit of research. And I talked to another friend of mine, and he said to me, yeah, you probably are on the spectrum. Like, that makes a lot of sense. And so the more I learned about it, the more I realized, that, yeah, this kind of makes sense. This explains a lot of things, like a lot of things. Why I didn't learn social skills. Like why I didn't just know that I had to take care of myself, like washing and cleaning and everything like that, or why I had to do it because I wasn't taught. Because because I had a traumatic childhood, and so we weren't taught life skills and stuff. So I just didn't know them. I didn't know there were life skills. Because my sister wasn't autistic, so she just picked them up naturally, and didn't have a problem with it. And I just didn't pick that all up, uh, and I had again, I had to, and it made me look bad because people were thinking I didn't take care of myself, I didn't clean my clothes or myself, because I didn't know I had to do that, right? I didn't know that wasn't I didn't know because you can never tell your own body odor, right? You can't. You're the last person that can tell that. So I just thought everyone was the same. That I didn't know there was this thing that everyone had to do because I just didn't know, right? And so it was embarrassing for me to learn that lesson, and I felt I was shamed and a lot about that, you're lazy, you don't care about yourself, and it wasn't that. It's just I didn't know. I just didn't know because I was never told this stuff and why it was important, and this was a rule, a social norm, but and there were lots of other things like that as well, like how to date and relationships and sex, and I didn't learn any of that stuff. I just didn't know. I mean, I'm demisexual, so I didn't have any kind of sexual attraction when I was a teenager. I wasn't really into that, so I just thought that was normal. And I thought that because I was brought up in the church, so it's like, oh, you just get married and then you have sex and it's all right, and whatever. Um, so again, it was like and that's probably why the church made sense to me, because there was a lot of rules. So it kind of gave me a bit of oh, I've got some structure in my life, some rules, and it's only actually after I realised I was autistic I was able to do deconstruction properly. But although the deconstruction probably started when my mother died, which is 23 years ago, but it sped up once I'd done therapy, and once I realised I was autistic, it sped up. The pace went really much quicker because I was more able to deal with it, right? But yeah, all those things, yeah, it's so, in hindsight, it's just so obvious. But at the time, it wasn't talked about much, and there was a lot of stigma around autism, and there still is with some people, and I just thought, well, I'm I didn't realize at all, and now, oh, it's obvious. And now, I've got a nibbling who is on the spectrum, and he's 6 years old and getting diagnosed and getting support and getting everything that he needs, and his school are helping him, and my sister's helping him, and his sister is helping him, and so it's really great because he's getting all the stuff that I should have got and didn't get, and I'm able to help him, which is really lovely. And he kind of knows that I'm autistic, I think, because we've got quite a strong bond, and I think he just somehow knows, that we're the same.
Yeah.
There's I think that's part of the connection between us, is that, so, but that kind of helps me, because knowing that people in my family, because it's obviously it's genetic, who get it in the future will get support, and I didn't get. I'm getting quite emotional talking about it, but but yeah. So I resonate with all of that. Yeah, that's how I found out. That's how I realized I was on the spectrum. And like you say, the more once you realize, it opens things up, and you realize just oh, that's what that was. That's what that was. Those were my obsessions. These are my obsessions now. I have periods where I get obsessed with movies, or I get obsessed with a certain movie, or I get obsessed with a certain sport, or I get obsessed with politics, or I'll have seasons of going through all these different things that become obsessions for a period, and then it skips to the next one. They just go in a circle. There's some that are always obsessions, like Superman, for example, but there's some constant ones, but there's lots of ones which kind of jump between them depending on what's happening, in the world or in my life or whatever. Like the US election, I was completely obsessed with politics, and I was tweeting about the US election all the time, and I got loads of followers when I did that for some reason. And I was watching it on TV all the time, because whenever there's an election, I get completely obsessive about politics. That's one of my things. I've got a degree in politics, so yeah. So it makes sense now in hindsight.
definitely. Special interests, like you can't, it's like, I don't think you can sit down and be like, this is going to be my next special interest. It just kind of
No,
comes to you and you're just like, I don't have a choice. I
yeah,
must
exactly.
focus and learn everything about this subject, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. You find something new, or someone tells you about something and it excites you, and like by the next day, you've gone through every Wikipedia page, every article, every book you can find on it. You've just done like, and you're almost an expert on it already. You're like, it's just exactly what I do. Like, watch YouTube videos on it, all that kind of thing. Yeah,
And then all you want to do is info dump on the people around you.
yeah, yeah,
But then you're like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, you probably don't want to hear about chickens again. But then I'll find myself just starting talking about chickens. And I'm like,
yeah.
oh, I'm sorry.
I love your interest in chickens. It's so cool. I just like I could never have chickens myself, but I just loved I love but one of the things I love about you is your interest in chickens. It's like it's so uniquely you.
I mean, it's one of those things. Like I said, you don't choose your special interest; it chooses you. Like I found a chicken walking down my street, so like I didn't choose chickens; chickens chose me.
They did, absolutely did. Yeah.
And I think that's the
Oh,
same thing for many other special interests. You know, they just come up, and you're like, I don't know why this is a thing that I'm so interested in right now, but I really want to learn about this.
yeah, absolutely. I haven't had a new one for a while actually. I'm sure that will change at some point, but because it seems to be like a rotation of like four or five of them, which
Yeah.
kind of go in a cycle. So, but that can always change. So I could find something new any day now.
Yeah. So about a year ago is whenever I decided to start the diagnosis process for
Mm,
autism, and it was very difficult because no one around here. I live in rural southeast Kansas, so looking around, there was a lot of resources for children, right, but not a lot for adults, um, especially when it came to diagnosing adults. So like I did a lot of online research and just Googling and trying to figure it out because even my therapist at the time was just like, I can try to figure this out, but like, I don't know. And I was lucky enough to find the person that I did. It was just through like Google searching. And I would read every, website, every profile of therapists or diagnosticians because I didn't want someone who wanted to fix me, right? I didn't want someone to see me as a problem or to see me as someone that had really like autism spectrum disorder is called a disorder, but like I just think of it as a different neurotype. And so I wanted to make sure that I had someone that, had the same kind of views on that as I did and wanted to help me kind of, take my autistic traits and use them in the best way possible for my own growth and my own, self love too. Um, and I didn't want to find anyone that was, using ABA therapy, which is pretty much conversion therapy for autistic people. Um, and so I was skimming through a lot of different, lots of information and lots of different diagnosticians, but I found someone who did everything, online and virtually. And of course, that person doesn't take insurance. So it's just flat rates for everything. But she was cheaper than many others that I found. And, you kind of paid as you went through appointments, and they were kind of spread out throughout the year because of how much, how many patients and clients that she had, which were a lot. And this particular diagnostician that I work with, and now I work with her, she's also a therapist, so I work with her now too. She uh, used to work with autistic kids and diagnosing autistic kids, um, but then decided to move to adults because she thought that there was like a lack of services there, especially for people who are assigned female at birth. So that was kind of her specialty, which was nice. um, and LGBTQ folks. So I was like lucky to find her, I think, because she was great. She made me feel comfortable right away whenever we first met. She laid out everything very nicely for me, told me like what each appointment was for, how the process would go. It was all laid out, so I didn't have any like surprises or anything. The only problem was like scheduling throughout the year, just because she was so busy. And I actually only had to wait like 4 months for my first appointment. And then, but everything was like from my first appointment in April and then my diagnosis in November. So it was only 6 months, which really isn't bad from what I've heard from other people. Many, wait lists are over a year long. So
Mm.
we had 4 different appointments where she kind of interviewed me and we talked pretty much about my entire life, my entire life story from birth until now. And then in between appointments, she had questionnaires for me where I would complete diagnostic assessments. I completed the RADs. There was one. I don't remember all of the different assessments, but there were several that I took. And then I took several questionnaires that kind of went through my different like social experiences, um, my different like relationship experiences, my different vocational experiences, and different childhood experiences. Like it asked a bunch of different open-ended questions. And so uh, she compiled everything. So pretty much my entire life story, she, like went through everything. I At the end, we had an appointment where she kind of went over the results with me, but I did receive like a 40-page document, um, pretty much detailing why I'm autistic. So I think it's kind of funny, just because I'm like, you don't think I'm autistic? I have a 40-page document that says so right here, giving you all the reasons why. Which was very validating for me in that final appointment. Um, Jeannie, that's the diagnostician's name and my therapist's name. Uh, she said, "You were right. You're autistic. Like you were right," and that felt really good because I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
I bet. Yeah.
I want people to tell me that my entire life, because there was so many times that I was right and people didn't believe me. And then
Yeah.
also, being a person that is chronically ill, I've been to so many doctors for those issues, and I've always
Mm.
diagnosed myself before the doctor. But no doctor has ever been like, "You were right," after like they confirmed what I thought. And
Doctors will never tell you that you were right. Like,
no, no, I'm like, like, that I told you I thought I had this, and the only reason that you tested was because I told you I thought I had this. So,
yeah.
and that's the case, but that felt really good. She's like, "So you were right, and here's why. Like, here's all the things." And part of the document kind of went through each diagnostic criteria of ASD in the DSM-5, and kind of outlined bullet points all the reasons why I met each criteria, and I met all of the criteria. And so it was very validating to see. It was kind of overwhelming because that's like life just like in front of you, in like diagnostic in a diagnostic lens. So it's a little weird, but also it makes everything make a lot of sense. And throughout the entire diagnostic process, she also told me, she's like, if you think of anything that you think would be helpful, like a memory of like a circumstance, something that happened, a social experience, like a disagreement, I don't know, like anything that has happened in your life, an example of something that you think this was odd, or this was strange, or this seems like an autistic thing that happened, she's like, just email it to me. So whenever I'd think of something, I'd email it to her, and she would add it to the her pile of things, all alley, I guess. And so that was just really interesting, and validating to go through that. And I
Mm.
friends all call me the guinea pig, because I was like the first one, and they're like, okay, when do we do it? Because I'm like, I could just tell you have autism. But um and self-diagnosis is completely valid. And I believe that, because most of the time, if you if you are autistic, you probably made autism your special interest at one point. And
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, yeah,
figured it out. So I believe you. Like, you've done all the research, you've taken all the tests, you've looked up the diagnostic criteria. If you care about that specific thing, you've listened to other people's experiences that are similar to yours. Who you are, and if you believe you're autistic, then you're actually autistic.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'm working on getting diagnosis for autism and ADHD at the moment. Uh, and of course, being ADHD, I've been struggling to get started. Right? Like, I did all the forms before and then handed them in, and then the doctors lost them.
Oh,
Like, I rang them months later, expecting them to have got them and be working on them, and they said we never got them. And I'm like,
uh,
I paid for these, and they got lost in the post, and I never knew. Like, I spent ages working on this with my sister and other people and collecting stories. Fortunately, because I was smart, I photocopied it and I'd kept a hard
ask that.
copy. Right? So it's just taking it into the doctors now, like, and I keep procrastinating even doing that because I'm ADHD, and that's a difficult thing to start doing something,
And
right?
you already did it, and they messed up.
Yeah, that's what's really annoying. Well, that's cost me a year basically. Like, it's so frustrating. But yeah, like, it's like with ADHD. Like, you can't. It's so difficult to start something. Like, if I need to clean the bathroom or something, like, thinking about doing it and then doing it is hard. Like, so I have this way of getting around that by just saying, "Oh, I'll go to the bathroom to wash my hands or do something else," and then of course, I end up doing, like, I ended up literally, this happened the other day. I was going to have a shower in the morning, and I ended up cleaning the bathroom, like, and then had a shower once I cleaned the bathroom, like, and I wasn't planning on that, but it just happened because that's ADHD. Like, and anyway, we're talking about autism, but yeah,
I have a hard time like cleaning. Have you read the book How to Clean House While Drowning?
no, but I'd like to. That sounds a good book. How to Clean House While Drowning. Is that?
Yeah, by Casey Davis, and she's really great. She actually has a podcast called Struggle Care, and talks about like care tasks, and she has ADHD, and the whole book is kind of written in a way, in a neurodivergent friendly manner.
Mm,
Even like even the font, she even thought about the font. She chose a font that was, she said it was neurodivergent friendly. And I got to say, I could read that way easier than any other book I have. I can't remember
uh,
what font it is now, but I was like, this is crazy. I can read this way easier. It was a great book to read, and it's short and simple. But yeah, she also has a TikTok and kind of talks about a lot of the same things, and a podcast called Struggle Care, which is like one of my favorite things right now. I've kind of hyper focused on it a little bit.
I'm gonna have to get that book, I think. Like, and maybe try and get them on my show, because that would be a really interesting conversation.
That would
That's
be really cool.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. Definitely. How to Keep House While Drowning. That's a really cool book title as well. I like that book title. Like, you can't forget that one, really.
Yeah. 'Cause that's how it feels a lot of times. You're like, I'm drowning in dishes, or I'm drowning in laundry, or like whatever it happens to be that day. Like laundry is really difficult for me. There's so many steps in laundry. And so like I will do like I'm like, oh, it just seems like so much to like take my laundry to the washer, put it in the washer, remember to come and get it out of the washer when it's done and put
Yeah,
it in the
yeah,
dryer.
yeah,
Dry it.
absolutely.
Remember to take it out of the dryer when it's done. Then you have to fold it and then put it away. Oh, there's so many steps, and that just like just bursts my ADHD and autism brain. Like I'm like I like the idea of starting that, and then forgetting like the net like 3 days later finding laundry in the dryer and it's all wrinkly and you're like, oh, no.
Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah, I often go to the kitchen to cook my dinner, and then I end up cleaning the kitchen and end up putting my washing in then, like before I, and it's like, all right, now I can have my dinner. Like it's not a, it's almost like a little trick that you can teach yourself. Like you can almost like pretend you're going to the kitchen for like almost like say, I'm going to go to the kitchen and do this little thing, but like, and but knowing that because you're ADHD, you'll probably end up doing something else.
Yeah.
Like it's a yeah. The only other way around it is to put reminders in my phone. That's the only other way around it. Like
I
I
put
couldn't
lots of
live
reminders
without a
in
calendar.
my
Like
I have
yeah,
so many reminders for everything. I saw this TikTok once of this guy talking about how many reminders, and he did like this kind of skit thing with himself, where his phone he was having this conversation with himself, and then his phone rang or his phone buzzed, and he's like, "Oh, it's my notification to take my pill," and he's like, "I'll just snooze it," and he puts it back in his phone, and then the phone like zaps him, and he like he was like making up this invention that like the phone will zap him until he takes his pills. And I was like, that's what we all need.
yeah, that's weird. I've never had a problem taking my medication because I'm epileptic, so I have medication for epilepsy, and so I never. It's always like a thing I do before bed. Like it's like something I. It's almost like a thing that I have to do. Like a. It's almost become like a routine thing, like a
I've
ritual almost. Like I have to do it before I go to bed. Like
made
yeah,
medication and like supplements and stuff. Like I've put that into my routine pretty well, and so that's one that I have pretty well. But I have to take things 3 times a day, so it's a little more challenging. But like I have like this intense pill organizer, and I still have reminder on my phone for the afternoon one because that's the one that I will forget. Like morning and evening are easier to remember than just like in the middle
yeah,
of the day.
yeah.
Um, but I've got that mostly down, but there are other things like that I'm like, not sure.
Hmm.
So getting diagnosed with ADHD was actually way easier than getting diagnosed with autism for some reason. I well, first I tried to go to my community health center because I was told that they diagnosed ADHD, and I guess they set me up with a nurse practitioner who only did medicine. And I'm like, I thought I was getting like gonna have like an evaluation, and that's not what she did. So they set me up with the wrong person, and she made me feel pretty shitty. And so I was like, okay, I'm leaving and I'm never coming back. And so um, I asked my physician, my primary care physician, about it. I had an appointment with her about other things, and I told her, I'm like, hey, I was just diagnosed with autism. I know that ADHD and autism, there's a high comorbidity there, and I think that I might have ADHD. Like, where would you recommend sending me to figure that out? And she actually was very supportive of it and got like really actually excited. She's like, oh yeah, yeah, let's do this. And so she sent me to the mental health center, and then I called them, and they got me in like the next day for testing, and
Hmm.
which was crazy. I was like, they're like, are you free tomorrow afternoon? And I was like, sure, why not? And I went in there, and I know that there are many different like diagnostic tools people use for ADHD and diagnosing that, but they only gave me like one test thing. Well, okay. They had me do this test on the computer, and I told them afterwards, I'm like, this test was meant to bore people out of their minds, wasn't it? And they laughed at me. They just laughed. But like the test on the computer, they're like, just follow the instructions and like, follow the instructions and do what the voice command tells you to do. And so the voice command on the computer was like, okay, there are going to be numbers that come up on the screen, 1 or 2. Please like click the mouse whenever you see the number 1. And I was like, okay. So I did that for a while. And then it changed to like, okay, now click whenever you hear the number 1 and not when you see it. And so sometimes you'd see the number 1, but they didn't say number 1, that kind of thing. A very simple thing. Wasn't trying to trick you or anything, but they did it for so long, James, so long that I got so bored. I was like, oh my gosh, my brain wanted to do anything but look at that. And so I started dazing off and thinking about other things. And then I didn't hear, like, I would hear the person saying like 1, and I didn't do anything. And then like a second later I'd be like, they said 1. And then I'd be like, oops, well, it's too late now. They're all on to the next one. And so that happened a bunch. And so my results came back and said that like there was I had like a lot of auditory impairment when it came to like um focusing on like auditory commands and that kind of thing. Um, and then that I came back with inattentive ADHD. And uh, so that was interesting. But I did want to try medication for ADHD, and that's why I talked to my doctor and wanted to do that. So they sent the results over to my doctor, and because I have POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia, she wasn't too keen on putting me on a stimulant, even a low dose stimulant, because of my heart. My heart rate gets real high. And so she was like, okay, let's just start with a non stimulant and see how it goes. So I was started on a non stimulant recently, Strattera, which I know a lot of people have been on for ADHD. Um, she just upped my dose for that again because I think it is helping me. I feel like I have a lot more mental energy to do things, like the mental energy for things like to figure out problems or organize things or that kind of thing. Whereas before, I felt like I didn't even have like the mental energy to start anything. Um, which starting things is still kind of difficult, like task initiation. That didn't fix that completely or anything, but because task initiation is something that's really difficult for me. Um, but usually, once I get going on a task, then I'm good. Um, but then sometimes I can hyper focus on it and then I ignore everything else and I'm just focusing on that one thing. And that has happened with school quite a bit since I've gone back to school last year, where I am like, okay, I'm going to do this task. And I think I'm just going to, it's kind of like what you were talking about with cleaning. Like, you're going to do this small thing in this bathroom, like, I don't know, clean the toilet, and then suddenly you're like scrubbing the floor and cleaning the shower and like everything else. It's like I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this one like assignment that I have, and then I'm like, oh, let's write an entire paper about this thing. And or sometimes I get kind of off on a while I'm researching for like a paper. I find and I'm searching for research articles. Sometimes I find a research article that piques my interest, but it does not have anything to do with my assignment. And I'm like, oh, I I'm gonna save that for later, but also I really want to read that right now because that sounds interesting. Um, that's a problem.
Yeah, I understand that. Some of that resonates for sure. Right. Yeah. 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 It's like I have to find. It's funny actually. I found a way that using my autism to help my ADHD.
Yeah.
And what I did, because like you can get meltdowns with overstimulation, or with with just like things that are just not working properly, or that you should there's certain things that each person has which trigger their meltdowns. For me, it's often technology when technology doesn't work because it's meant to have certain rules. Um, so and I but like when I have those when I have a day where just everything is going wrong and everything's bad and everything's not working and everything all the little things are going wrong, like I'm just missing my bus, or I'm just like all those little things. I created this rule of we called one of those days, right? So when I realize that those things are all happening, I just shift my brain to like it's one of those days. And once I'm in that like mindset, it's like everything can go wrong and I might have a meltdown. Like because I've created a rule for myself where I can shift into and not have a meltdown, which would normally give me a meltdown.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
a
the
great technique.
ADHD meltdown or autistic meltdown, and it works. It works. Like I've had less meltdowns since I did that. Like it was just like, oh, I can actually use my autism here to kind of help me. And I have a therapist who's autistic as well, and works with autistic people, and they helped me figure that out. Like that you can make rules, I can make rules for myself, like which can help me kind of get through without too many meltdowns, and it works. But it's kind of cool when you can kind of use your autism to help you, like with autism and other conditions that you have, like ADHD.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really cool sometimes when I can hyper focus on one thing, like, and get a lot of stuff done or learn a lot of things in like a short amount of time. Like, um, it's really fun sometimes. Sometimes it's inconvenient for the people around you, which I think that's a lot of what society looks at when they look at autism, right? They're like, oh, you're a problem to be solved, or um, eh, we're doing things that inconvenience neurotypicals or make them uncomfortable. And that's not really our problem,
yeah,
you
it's
know,
not.
unless if we're not harming someone, then
We're
uh,
not,
then
that's
no.
not causing harm. There's no problem. Like if you're causing harm, then sometimes you may not realize it, and you can
Yeah,
like be told, and then you don't do it again. Like as if
yeah,
uh,
because
uh,
that's something that I think I've run into problems with, is that people don't tell me whenever I've like offended them or made them feel a certain way that's not good, you know? And I'm like,
mm,
if you just tell me, then I will fix it and I won't ever do that again. But I didn't know that that upset you. But you have to
yeah,
tell me.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. I always say to people, just tell me. Like don't assume that I know that it offends you because I won't know. Like because I would never do anything that hurts anybody, like intentionally. Like so, if I do something which causes harm, it's not intentional, and so you need to like so just tell me, and I won't do it again, right?
Yeah.
And like it's really like with an autistic person, it's that simple. Just tell me it harms you, and then I'll make a rule, and I won't do it again. Like that's it. It's simple as that, really. Like for
Yeah.
me, anyway. Like
I think that's where a lot of just disruption with in relationships comes from, like in my life, that's usually it, is I do something that upsets someone else and I don't know it. And then they are stewing over there over it and expecting me to go apologize, and I don't even know I've done anything wrong. And
yeah,
and I've just said no to those relationships. If you're going to assume that I've purposely harmed you, then you don't really know me. And that's what I've found with a lot of people, is that if they are assuming the worst of me, I don't think I want you in my life. And
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah,
most of my good friends,
yeah,
they won't assume the worst of me, and we try to tell each other, like, because a majority of us have experienced, some sort of trauma, and oh, well, a majority, all of us have. And, we can get triggered by different things, people say. And um and sometimes I'm not even sure why I'm triggered. Someone will say something and I'm like, "Oh, that really bothered me. Why is that really bothering me that they said that?" Um but it's not usually
mm,
them, right? Like, I had this situation where I was with a group of people, and a friend of mine, I was telling a story about um me when I was younger. I used to play basketball, and I was telling a story about how they used to call me Q because that stood for Queen of Fouls, because I was a really aggressive basketball player. And someone in the group, like, who was a newer friend, like, was like, "Wow, really?" Like they that surprised them. Uh, and but I kind of took it as like they thought I was lying. That was like my first thing in my head, like, "You think I'm lying?" And I didn't say that, but I was just kind of like, I kind of shut down. And I didn't really realize why I was shutting down at the time. But then later I was like, like, when Tom said that, I thought that he was like accusing me of lying, which was something that many people did to me growing up. Um,
mm,
they would question, what I was telling them. And I don't lie, James. I'm really bad at it. Like, I'm really bad at lying. Like, and so I don't do it. I'm a truth teller. And so that would always really bother me. Like, this is maybe a silly example, but like when I was a child, like, I saw, an owl in our tree in our backyard. And so I told, my family, I'm like, "There's an owl that's living in our tree now." And no one believed me. And until they saw the owl like weeks later. But, like, just little things like that that built up over time. I'm like, "Oh, so whenever he said that, I'm like, he thinks I'm lying. He thinks I'm a liar." And so that triggered something in me, right? And
mm,
we actually talked through it later, which was really good, because he messaged me. He's like, "I think I said something that made you upset." Like, and I don't know what it was. And I was like, "It wasn't you." Like, I told him, I'm like, "You said this. My response was this. I know that you didn't mean to, like, accuse me of lying during this time. I know that that was not your intention." And he's like, "No, that wasn't my intention. It just was a surprising thing that I found out about you." And I was like, just expressing my surprise. But he's like, "I'm glad that I, am getting to know you better and learning these things about you." And, I was just like, "Yeah, like, this has happened to me a lot. And so when you said this, that triggered that response in me." And I kind of
mm.
shut down after that conversation. So, like, that happens a lot, I think, in conversations, and we have to, like, kind of figure out why that's happening and communicate um, to the other person, because a lot of times the other person isn't meaning to trigger you.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's right. It's just that they don't know sometimes. Yeah, and I know I know what you're talking about, because I think there's friends who have assumed the worst of me when I've done something. Well, it was literally, I didn't even know that I'd done anything wrong. I had no idea. Like, I didn't even know I'd caused them any harm or that I triggered them. I didn't know I'd breached any boundaries. I didn't like they hadn't we hadn't talked about those boundaries. Like, so I didn't
Mhm.
know them. And sometimes I don't know what would be triggering or what wouldn't be, and I just assumed that it wouldn't be because I thought we were friends and stuff, and that you would just like say like that we'd have a conversation about it. If I did trigger you, that I could just apologize and resolve it. Like, because
Yeah.
I don't think I don't think I told them in so many words I was autistic, but I think I talked about it enough on my timeline that they knew, or that they'd known I might be autistic. But they just assumed the worst of me and just like didn't even explain. They just blocked me without even explaining why. They didn't even have a conversation. I didn't even know if don't know what I'd done wrong, because I checked all my interactions with them, and I was like, there's nothing here which is inappropriate or offensive or harmful, or that I meant any harm with, or like that I would assume that I would think anybody would be harmed by. But it was really strange, and it was really sad because I cared about this person and I know they're a good person, but it's just I think they just assume negative intent about me, and that's more to do. And I knew that was more to do with them and their journey and experience more than me. But so but in the end, I just had to let it go, because it's like I know I did. There was nothing on my part to cause harm. There was no intent on my part. If I'd known what I was doing was causing harm, I wouldn't have done it. And if they'd asked me to apologise, I would have done, and I would have made any amends that I needed to make, and that would have been it, you know. But they didn't do that, and that's sad. But like you're saying, like if people are just going to assume the worst about me the first time I make a mistake, or the first time I do something that I like, that I kind of do something which causes harm unintentionally, and they're just going to assume that that's something bad, that's something I did maliciously, then I don't really want them in my life, because they don't know me. Because if they knew me, they knew I would never and ever intend to harm anybody ever. Like I don't I'm not I, I couldn't intentionally harm somebody, because I wouldn't be able to. Like, even if I
Yeah.
was angry with them, I wouldn't. Even if I was angry with them and part of me wanted to do harm to them, I couldn't actually do it, because it's not in my nature.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to do harm to anybody. Like, I want to see the best in everybody. I try to see the best in everybody, and that's got me hurt sometimes. But
Yeah, a
yeah,
lot of what you're talking about, letting those things go or talking them through. It's hard to do when you have, ADHD and autism, and especially and that leads to rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which I know you and I have talked about.
yes, rejection sensitive dysphoria. Yeah, that's a big thing for me.
So yeah,
Yeah.
rejection sensitivity, and so that's that's a whole other thing, but also, but it's related. And there was another thing I thought of when you were talking about that. Now I'm not going to remember, but it left my brain.
Oh, that's a shame. Uh, um, but but yeah, you and I both, yeah, rejection sensitive disorder as a whole. We should do a podcast on that, because that's a really important thing that not many people know about,
Yeah.
and it goes alongside ADHD a lot of the time, and yeah, and abandonment. I have abandonment trauma anyway, so it's um, it
And
can, and it can end up being self fulfilling. Anyway, sorry. Yes, you were going to say something.
well, I recently had kind of a conversation with my mother-in-law about rejection sensitivity dysphoria because well, I shared with her about my autism diagnosis, my ADHD diagnosis, and we were talking, and she has ADHD, and she hadn't heard the term rejection sensitivity dysphoria, but I believe that that's something that she also relates to, and so we had kind of a conversation about that and how that affects our relationship and how we interpret what the other person is saying, and that was really good for us to have that conversation. I think I've been having a lot of really difficult conversations with people lately, and it's exhausting, but I think it's so important. I
Mm,
had
yeah, I
a
agree.
conversation, several conversations recently with my mom that were just emotionally exhausting when it came to boundaries, and I also shared with her about my autism diagnosis, and how that kind of related to some of our communication issues, I guess, or communication boundaries, or things that have come up whenever in our relationship. I'm like, I told her, I'm like, a lot of times you and our family in general tend to just be silent about things and not talk about them in order to keep the peace. And I'm like, but I'd rather you just tell me straight up what's going on. And please, please, can you do that? So we're working on that. But because I'm like, I just want to know one way or another. And sometimes that kind of trumps the I hate using that word now. Oh,
Yeah, I get that. The same. I try and avoid using that phrase now. Like,
oh no.
yeah,
So a lot of times my need for like directness kind of supersedes like my rejection sensitivity to dysphoria just a little bit sometimes, when I'm just like, please just tell me the straightforward answer, even if it's like you think maybe it's a sensitive thing, or it may like hurt me a little, if that makes sense, like not like harm me, but like constructive criticism, I would
yeah, yeah,
rather
absolutely.
I
Yeah,
would rather you tell me straight up what's going on and what you want from me, especially like in work situations or in school situations, like feedback from supervisors or from professors on like your assignments. Like I would always like I would be always be the one to make sure that my supervisor in my work like did their like, semi-annual reviews with me. I'm like, I want to know how I'm doing. Like I want to know how I'm doing and how I can improve. And a lot of people don't understand that for some reason. And I'm not sure if that's an autism thing or not, or a neurodivergent thing or not. But for me, like I always want to improve, and I thrive on feedback that's constructive. And so when I'm not getting that, I ask for it, and a lot of times people don't think that's what I'm asking for. I have an example. I submitted an assignment this last semester to my herbalism professor, and it was just an outline and bibliography of our like research paper that we were doing for the like our of the larger project for the semester. And so this was like just the outline and everything. And I had already given him my kind of uh, out or like summary of what I wanted the research paper to focus on, because I was doing something kind of outside his norm because why not? I chose my own topic instead of one of his topics. But he had given me not a bad grade, but it was a B, and but he didn't really give me any feedback as to why that it wasn't an A, like or like any feedback as to what I could have done better. And so I was like, I'm confused about this. Like, and so I tried to write like a very concise email to him, just asking him to kind of outline like what I could do better next time I have to write up like an outline or bibliography for a research paper. And I think after talking through this with my therapist, we think that he like read my email as kind of like a challenge to the grade, because he responded, and his response was that he sees my point and then he raised my grade. And I was like, that's not even what I asked. Like, and he still never gave me feedback. I was like, you don't even have to raise my grade. Like, I'm not actually like asking you to do that. And I didn't even care that, like, I cared, but like, that's not, wasn't the purpose of my email or why I reached out to him. I just always want to improve and do better. So in different classes, I want to know like what his feedback was on what I could do better in that assignment. And he did not get that at all. And I'm like, I felt like I was very clear, but like my therapist was like, I'm sure you were, like, and we were talking about it, and she's like, a lot of times when I feel like, she said, a lot of times neurotypicals like see your asking for feedback as like a challenge to their authority. And I'm like, that's weird. Because that's not what I'm trying to do. I just want to know what I'm doing good, what I could work better on, And it's interesting that that causes some issues and miscommunication when I didn't ask for a different grade.
hmm. Yeah, yeah, I understand that. Yeah, it's like, yeah, communication is always a thing, isn't it? When you're like we are, like trying to get people to understand what you really mean, or like what your intent was, and
got a
not
whole
getting not,
I got a whole
yeah.
damn degree in communication, and now I realize that I did that because I'm autistic, and I really needed to understand communication.
That's brilliant.
Uh,
That's hilarious.
I got a whole degree in it, and like I still am like I don't understand neurotypical communication. I
Oh,
feel like I've gotten better, but then the moment I feel like I've gotten better, something like this happens, like with the professor, and I'm like,
yeah.
maybe I don't. Maybe I have no idea what I'm doing.
Oh, brilliant. This has been so great. I'm sure the people listening with autism and ADHD have been encouraged, like I have. And thank you for sharing so honestly. It's really great and really courageous. So thank you. Uh,
Thanks for it's always great talking to you.
yeah, it is. Yes, and we'll definitely have you back. There's loads more we can talk about, including RSD, and there's loads of other things as well we can talk about. So I'm sure you'll be back on the show again, and we'll try and do that soon. But where can people find you and your work online?
Yeah, so you can find me on most social media on Twitter at anxious by queen. And the Witchy Bibliophile is my business. Thewitchybibliophile.com is my website, so you can find me there too.
Fantastic. Do go and check all that out and give Ali a follow. They are really amazing. So thank you for coming on the show, and thanks for listening, everybody.